Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Road to Liberty podcast. I'm your host, Token, and I'm joined tonight with a special guest, Carl Krambeck, the Scientific Libertarian. What's up, man?
Nothing much. Just sitting here in a warm lab coat.
Awesome. Well, it's the lab coat that gives you the credibility.
This is where all the power comes from. Without this, you just can't take me seriously.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I can never take Bernie Sanders or AOC seriously, because neither of them ever wear a lab coat.
That's right.
But I will give Bernie this. He does kind of look like a mad scientist with the way he combs his hair. So he does have that. Now, if you would just take a balloon to your hair and let it go all wavy and be a mad scientist, that would give you double legitimacy.
That would work out. I think you're onto something.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of Bernie Sanders, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is so we could talk about the plagiarized Green New Deal that Bernie Sanders released. You'll remember a few months back, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez released her own Green New Deal. And here we are now, Bernie Sanders completely ripping that off and making his own. He doesn't even try to be original with it, just calls it the Green New Deal. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So if you had a chance to take a look at this monstrosity of a bill?
I did, and let's see. The first one was about 16 pages long and, wide margins, and this thing's, 20 with very thin margins. It is just
a beast.
Big, wish list of things, that I guess we're powering with unicorns and fairy dust or something. And 16.7 trillion, something like that, which is, I guess, lowballing it. I don't know.
Yeah, the whole bill, I think it's in the ballpark of 19 to 20 trillion dollars. Just that's trillion with a T. And there's a whole list of things that Bernie plans to do with these. He's going to completely overhaul our infrastructure. He's going to get us completely off fossil fuels by the year 2030. He's going to close all fossil fuel plants, all nuclear power plants. He's going to buy everyone a new car. He's going to get everyone a new house. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And he's all going to do it through the magic of government and save the planet. Yes, sir. He's going to save the planet, Bernie Sanders is.
The part that really kind of tickled me, he goes right into how climate change is causing all these catastrophic weather conditions, and you got extra hail, damaging winds, all these things. And then he goes in to talk about how we're going to use a whole bunch of electricity sources that rely on the weather.
Mm-hmm.
So solar panels getting hail damage and windmills, spinning too fast and damaging everything in the system. That's, he says it's going to happen. And then he says we should use these weather-reliant energy sources.
So what's the problem with these energy sources? Why can't we just go to solar and wind? Because I keep hearing from the Democrats left and right that all we have to do is go to renewable. It's just that easy, and it'll just be the best thing in the world. Why can't we just get off of fossil fuels and go to these renewable energy sources?
Well, I mean, cost is kind of a thing. So I just wrote down so this is kilowatt hours is what this is based on. So solar is about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which has gone down slightly, but not that much. Wind is about 6 cents. You can get a really good windy location and get about 4 cents per kilowatt hour, and that's great. And then natural gas and coal is right around 4.2, 4.1. Geothermal is another one where it's like, well, we got to find a good spot for it, because not every place is going to be perfect for geothermal. But that's pretty good. I mean, that's like 1 to 3 cents, because they're not just putting these up where, you can't get geothermal energy. So they're limited in space. And then if you look at old nuclear, it's about 2.1 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's cheaper And then, you know, we have these fourth generation coming out with nuclear plants, which is what I go into that deal. And you have thorium that can get really low cost, and then you have fast reactors that can burn up all that spent nuclear fuel that Bernie says we should all be afraid of. And it's a solid just sitting there doing nothing. It's just not bothering anybody. But if we go geothermal and we, you know, keep the natural gas, that releases the #1 radiation source, which is radon. So we're drilling into the earth and just pumping up a bunch of gases and a whole bunch of geothermal energy, and then we end up getting more radiation than a nuclear plant because it's all shielded. But so it's, I always thought that was kind of funny. If we compared apples to apples radiation, you know, fracking and geothermal wouldn't meet the requirements as nuclear. So that's kind of one of those funny things. But we should be afraid of it, according to Bernie Sanders. So
well, yeah, we've all watched Chernobyl, right? That happens at literally every power plant every other year. So they just explode randomly. So why shouldn't we be afraid of nuclear? Here's the thing: I keep hearing that nuclear energy is just this horrible time bomb. It's going to kill us all, release all this radiation, blah blah blah. We should be scared of it, and we should phase it out. Is that true?
No, I mean, if you look at all the nuclear accidents that have ever happened, you can maybe max out at about 90 deaths, right? But you're going to have to put up more electrical lines. You're going to have to run more electrical lines, put up more telephone poles, get a whole smart grid. And one of the most dangerous jobs in America is a lineman. So you're increasing the jobs for those people, and you're increasing very dangerous jobs for people. So a lot of these jobs that Bernie Sanders says he's going to magically make are going to be somewhat dangerous jobs, installing windmills and solar panels and power lines. So in reality, I don't understand why people have a problem getting wrapped around that idea, but you don't need that unless you're dealing with practically any other energy source besides windmills and solar panels. I mean, you have to run a lot of electricity lines for windmills and solar panels to each individual one, and then source it in with a smart grid that we don't really have yet.
Well, it's not just that. It's not just installing all the new grid for all the new windmill solar panels or whatnot. Bernie Sanders' Green New Deal is going to completely replace the infrastructure we have right now. So all the power lines we have now, everything we have now is going to be completely replaced with this Green New Deal, which I didn't even think of that point. Yeah, lineman is one of the most dangerous jobs that you can have. People die all the time trying to work these dangerous infrastructure jobs. And here comes Bernie Sanders. He's gonna hire 20 million people to work on this. And who's going to be the people who do this primarily? It's going to be people who don't already have jobs. It's going to be people who are poor, who are going to be working these jobs. And, you know, they're going to be the ones that are suffering. They're going to be the ones that are going to be taking these workplace injuries in this plan, and all to do something that we don't even have the money to do.
Yeah, that's more money than we have in currency. It's about 10 times as much money as we have in currency. So we're spending fairy dust at this point. But I mean, I guess we've been spending it for a while, but we might as well just up the fairy dust and unicorn farts for this whole idea here. It's just ridiculous.
I mean, one of the funniest thing I found about this whole plan, so it's going to cost around $20 trillion, and that's what Bernie says it's going to cost. We all know that it's going to cost way more than that to do any of this. Because, government does not keep costs down. They have no incentive to keep costs down. That's why the debt is so high, because they just like spending money. So let's say $40 trillion is somewhere close to more accurate. The way he plans on paying this is the funniest part of it all. Because me and you both know that he's actually going to pay for this by printing money. That's the only way you can pay for this. But you can't say that. You can't say, hey, I'm just going to print money and that's how we're going to pay for it. He has to find some halfway reasonable way to say he's going to do it. First way, of course, is he's going to tax the hell out of the fossil fuel industry. Funny thing about that is the entire plan is to eliminate the fossil fuel industry. So this is the case of literally killing the goose that laid the golden egg here. The fossil fuel industry is going to fund his plan, but we're going to kill the fossil fuel industry, making it so that they can no longer fund it. Amazing.
How can that go wrong? Right?
I don't know.
How could it go wrong?
It's the kind of logic that only a hardcore progressive could even come close to understanding. But the other way he's going to pay for it is he's going to create 20 million new jobs. Yep, just going to create them out of thin air. And he's going to tax those 20 million people. And that's going to pay for it.
So you're what's that little meme where they're plugging the outlet into itself?
Yeah, that's essentially what it's doing.
Yeah, he must think that generates a lot of power. He must think
it does. I was listening. This isn't my analogy. I was listening to Dave Smith's Part of the Problem earlier today, and he made this analogy. Just say you have a job, you bring home $1,000 a month. Let's just say that's what it is. You need to make more money. So what you do is say, hey, honey, I'm going to hire you to do the dishes. And then I'm going to tax the money I give you. I'm going to pay you $100 and tax 20 of it. Boom. $20 of new income. Boom. $1,000, 20 of income. And that's how we're going to get out of this predicament that we're in.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it literally makes no sense at all. And anybody with any kind of sense at all would notice that. But apparently that doesn't even occur to Bernie Sanders.
It's so hard to make fun of it until it really it kind of becomes sad and you're like, wow, this exists. It was kind of like you see the Democratic Socialist convention.
Oh, we did a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I got part of it, but it's that same feeling where you read it, just like watching that, and you're just like, wow, this is a thought that people have had. This is something that he's put thought into this, and you can tell he's put thought into it, right? Because it's 20 pages. He just hasn't like connected dots whatsoever. So it's like he's thought about it, but he hasn't like connected anything with the economy whatsoever or reality or anything like that. So it's strange because you're thinking to yourself, how does somebody think like this? And it's amazing, really. I don't understand it.
Like you go through this Bernie Sanders Green New Deal, and it's not a plan. Let's put that out here. His plan is not really a plan, because here's what it is. It's a list of things he wants, and then he just throws a big fat number at it. It's like, I want everyone in America to have an electric car. Boom, $500 billion for that. I want to weatherize every home in America. Boom, another $100 billion there. What else does he have in there? I want to build a high-speed rail system across the entire country that links every major city to each other. Boom, another $1 trillion for that. And it's just a list of things. I want this, I want that, and throw a random big-ass number at it and say, that's our plan.
You ever write a Christmas list when you're like a little kid and you start asking for like helicopters and stuff? It's really kind of just like that. It really, as you read it, you're thinking of, as a little kid, you're just, like, oh, I want an Apache helicopter, and I was like, yeah, that's not feasible, but I can't comprehend that when I'm, 5. So it's very similar to that, and there's a lot of there's a couple contradictions in there too. So I mean, we mentioned like all the weather catastrophes are going to stack up and pile up, and then we're going to use energy sources that rely on the weather. And then there's agriculture. He's going to go into agriculture, and we're going to go organic, and we're only going to fund small and medium farms. So we're going to cut efficiency down like crazy. But then he's also going to give your kid free lunch at school from food that exists somewhere, I guess. So he's controlling food too, which is not an uncommon theme in the U.S., but he's really narrowing down a stranglehold on what's considered food. So it's got to be organic, I guess, to a certain extent. He never like expands on it, because I think in the back of his mind he may just think it's ridiculous, but maybe not. I'm not sure. He has like a long history of this pseudoscience. So he wants like Medicaid to pay for like things like acupuncture and things that are some people swear by them, but really that's not proven medicine for people who are in a seriously sick situation. But he wants to improve vitamin supplements, which makes sense if they're approved by your doctor. But I mean, if you're just grabbing them off the shelf and just trying to mix and match, it has no rhyme or reason to it. And he goes into that quite a few times throughout history, of just nonstop pseudoscience. And then I don't know if you watched the forum he had on Fox News, but they actually brought up the fact that when he was supporting the shutdown of the nuclear plant in Vermont, it actually increased CO2 emissions by quite a bit. And he just kind of denied it. He just kind of said like, oh, there's no way, it's like the data proves that it increased CO2 emissions, but he's just going to pretend like it doesn't even exist. Like it's, I'm on Fox News, they're lying, even though Forbes and Vice and every other single news media outlet said the same thing. He's just going to deny that this is actually happening. So he's got a big history with kind of anti-science themes.
Well, that's the thing about it. Like, you read this Green New Deal. I'm just waiting for when he's going to give everybody a free pony. I mean, he ripped off AOC already. Why not rip off Vermin Supreme as well?
Well, zombies on treadmills, and I don't think anybody can prove me wrong on this one, but zombies on treadmills seems like the most efficient energy source out there. Because, why not?
Why not? There's no reason not to. Yeah, so I think we're both in agreement that this is an absolutely ridiculous plan. That's the thing about it. You have to combine this $20 trillion plan with all his other stuff that he wants. Because remember, he still wants free college. He still wants a guaranteed job. He still wants health care for all. There's still a whole lot of other things that he wants to pay for. And he's going to pay for it entirely by taxing the rich, by taxing the fossil fuel industry out of existence, by taxing the people he hires. He's going to do all that. Oh, and he's going to cut military spending, which, hey, I'm all for cutting military spending. That's fine with me. But we do not spend anywhere near enough money on the military to make up for this plan, or any of his plans at all. That money, I don't know how much they think we spend on the military, but it's not as nearly as much as he wants to spend. And I doubt he's going to cut it all completely, because, people are still going to want to have a military, even if they want this Green New Deal. They're not going to want to cut it down to zero. So let's talk a little bit about your alternative to the Green New Deal, because a lot of libertarians get a lot of flack from a lot of people for being anti-environment or something like that. We don't care about the environment. We don't have a plan to deal with the dangers of climate change. Elizabeth Warren says that the world is literally going to end, so we gotta do something. So what does the Lean New Deal do?
So it's on my Facebook page. It's got about 12 points. Some of them are a little long. Number 4 goes into a couple different research topics we could actually deal with. So then it says cutting subsidies for, oil, natural gas, obviously, windmill, solar panels, ethanol. So it cuts the subsidies, but then we go into how we're actually going to use those in the private sector more efficiently. And then we're talking about increasing, or not even increasing the amount we're spending, just using a portion on that to kind of solve some of these installation issues with fourth generation nuclear, which is going to be cheaper. It's going to account for taking a bigger carbon footprint out of the economy. And there's 2 types. I put in just molten salt reactors because there's thorium reactors, which are pretty much just designed to be as cheap as possible, and then you have molten salt fast reactors, and those are really focused towards getting that stigma of that nuclear waste out of the way. And that is kind of a big deal with nuclear energy, is getting that whole nuclear waste stigma out of the way. And one of the ways to do that is to burn it up in a pretty efficient fast reactor. And then we go into ethanol blend caps. I think Ted Cruz actually went into ethanol blend caps, throughout his campaign, and he was talking about how you have to have a set amount of ethanol, and how that would actually be a big boom for the industry, for the ethanol industry, and you wouldn't actually need to subsidize it quite as much anymore. So solar panels and windmills, but we also go into those cooperative programs. So these would be like tax-free cooperative programs, and these solar panels, windmills, geothermal. There's mini hydroelectric. So if you have a creek running through your house, these things can spin like that. They even have a couple that are like, bicycles, which I thought was amazing because you can just exercise, pedal a day, and charge a battery. That goes into like the extreme stuff. But we're just talking about energy cooperatives. The taxpayer isn't footing the bill, but you're sharing collectively in a cooperative. You're just paying a monthly bill like you would at an electric company. And then you're just slowly paying off your windmill, solar panels, whatever energy source you choose. And that's really what I don't think libertarians are necessarily against wind and solar. They just think that it was this big revolutionary idea to get people to gain independence from energy companies. And then what did they do? They just kind of turned it backwards and said, okay, well, now the energy companies are going to use it, and you're just going to pay the energy company. So there's no independence there. So with this situation, we're going to have more independent people, and libertarians always kind of see that as a good thing. And then the privatization of air travel and railways is kind of a big one. In Europe, they often say, Europe has like this great public transport system, but it's in large part privatized. It's pretty much a privatized system, and it's a capitalist system. So it's kind of weird how when governments try to do it, they put all this money into it, and then they think, oh, we're going to turn a profit like Europe. Well, it's not going to turn a profit if the government's doing it. In Europe, for one, they're closer together, so you can make more money off of a bullet train in Europe than you can putting much larger lines down. Not in every location, but in some locations you could make some money. So privatizing that and then making it a more efficient system is kind of in there. And then the research, this one's always fun because I always get sent new research topics that are just ridiculous. So I actually mentioned a few in here. Quail's sexual preference while on cocaine.
And we got to know that.
We got to know that.
That needs funding.
That needs to be funded. We funded it.
Oh yeah, that was I think that was one of Rand Paul's Festivus grievances he mentioned one time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know why he has a problem with that. I mean, I want to know the sexual preferences of quails on cocaine. I
Well,
just assumed that everybody else did too.
right. So, I mean, we're just assuming everybody wants to know. So we're just taking their tax money and saying, hey, we know that everybody wants to know the sexual preference of quails on cocaine. So we're going to fund this.
Well, we
And
know
it's
at
going to be
least
great.
one person wanted to know that. At least one person.
At least one, maybe more. I'm not sure. Yeah, there it goes into a lot of that stuff. So it just talks about kind of animal digestion. So seaweed proteins, I think if you add about 2% seaweed, you can actually cut methane emissions close to 99% within the cattle. So that's a big one. Methane's a much more serious greenhouse gas, but the first Green New Deal said we're just going to eliminate cow farts, I guess. This would eliminate the methane from cow farts, which I think is a good difference to make, right? We want to get rid of the methane, but even in the atmosphere, methane goes back into CO2 after about 12 years on average. So methane's a problem, but it's not like a extremely long-lived problem. Um, so seaweed proteins are kind of a big one on there. Enzyme. We did a couple. I used to do research for Hillshire, and we were doing gut microbes on turkeys. And one of the proteins we found was myostatin, which was kind of an interesting one. And I go into that early on the Facebook page, but it's just an off switch for muscle development. So if you don't have this off switch, your muscles just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's great for agriculture. It's great. It makes healthier meat. There's less fat. It's a fantastic system and more feed efficiency. And if you have more feed efficiency, you're not pumping out quite as much methane. So that's another big one. Gut microbes are kind of a new study that we're going into, and the seaweed proteins, kind of studying that. That's a big one. Another huge one I got here for research, oceanic phytoplankton. So oceanic phytoplankton is responsible from anywhere between like 50 to 85% of all the CO2 conversion to O2 on the planet. And that can vary quite a bit because, waves and tidal, the waves kind of control how much sunlight they get and where they're at. So that varies quite a bit. And it's really hard to measure the oceans. So it's like, okay, there's this much phytoplankton here and this much there. It's, just kind of trying to take an average. But two of the biggest problems with phytoplankton is plastic waste. So that's, we go into plastic waste later on in the deal. But plastics can break down and then they can, not only block sunlight, but they can also kind of inhibit growth of phytoplankton, which is another big one. I didn't see much about plastic in Bernie's deal, which was odd because I think plastic's a pretty big deal and it should be, incentivized to recycle it. But he
Now
just went into.
you actually have something in this Lean New Deal that addresses the problem of plastic directly. You go, end all federal barriers to industrial hemp and marijuana products.
Mm-hmm.
That would actually help a lot when it comes to plastic waste, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and that's one of those weird things that all kind of ties together, right? So if you have more nuclear energy, you're using less fossil fuels. If you have less fossil fuels, the supply of the PET petroleum plastic kind of dwindles, and then eventually the hemp plastic becomes kind of a more economic choice. But we're not just forcing hemp plastic on; it kind of happens naturally within the deal. By one thing kind of affecting another. So that's a big thing. Like imagine growing corn and the police stop by and they're just going to start testing all your corn to see if you're growing this other type of corn. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept. So ending marijuana, uh, decriminalizing that is kind of a big factor because farmers need to kind of feel comfortable with the crop they're growing too. And I think that's kind of a big part of why the deal helps out so much with that area. So, I mean, hemp's got 5,000 different uses. You can make building materials, pretty much anything you can make with wood, you can make with hemp. You can make plastics out of hemp. There's a wide variety of applications, and we've, taken a while to actually see how many applications, because, we did this whole prohibition on hemp thing back in the day. So that's a lot. There's a lot of research into that we could really benefit the plastics going into the ocean. And another thing that you could do, you could actually pollute it with iron. So if you pollute the oceans with iron, iron is part of not just the heme molecules and the hemoglobin in humans. It's also in plants too. They have iron as a growth limiting factor for phytoplankton. So really just throwing iron where it'll get churned up and used by phytoplankton is also another idea that a lot of scientists have looked into, which is kind of a bigger scale. But then if you look at like recycling programs and stuff like that, you could utilize something like that, but not sure how that would work.
All right, so we're pushing up on a half hour. It's about the length I like to keep these interviews. But one more question: if you could, you have several planks in your Lean New Deal. If you could implement one, which would you choose?
One? Well, I may get some backlash for saying this, but number 12, reducing corporate welfare to have a more even economy would probably be my favorite, and then the nuclear would probably be after that, and then the phytoplankton after that. So it's the corporate welfare system, just manipulating the market and the energy market to kind of create these problems, has been kind of a big issue with keeping America kind of dirty, with the dirty power that we've had over the years. So that would probably be one of them.
All right. So where can people find your stuff? Where can they read about the Lean New Deal? Where can they find you? Pretty much.
Sure. It's Facebook page is called The Scientific Libertarian, and I've pinned it to the top of the page so you can read through that. I just put it in photo format, so it's kind of easy to read 1 through 12, and then leave some comments, tell us what you think, and that's about it.
Now, remember, everyone, The Scientific Libertarian, it's a great page. Go over there, check it out right now. Carl, thank you so much for stopping by, explaining why Bernie's Green New Deal is kind of a shit show and why the Lean New Deal is the obvious superior alternative.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Remember, everybody, the website is roads2liberty.com. That's roads2liberty.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. We're on Minds. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. And we're on just about every podcast site that you can think of. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a good night, everybody.